Right, today we're going to touch on a bit of a subject I've not really done in much depth. It has appeared in some previous videos and people have been asking the question about composting. There's no real correct way of doing it. There is ways to speed the process up. You know, that let's say it's compost, but in general purpose it means organic matter, whether it's grass clippings, you know, fallen leaves, manure. It all rots down. There's a process it goes through. There's obviously cold composting and hot composting. Now, the hot composting is what I tend to do, but it kind of involves a bit on mass and getting the mixture right. So if you've only got like a tiny amount, it's a bit tricky to get it hot. So maybe you could go into trench composting, where you dig a trench and you put your food scraps in the ground and you bury them, and they'll cold rot down there, and the worms will distribute it through the soil that way. The only problem with cold composting is possible seed germination from unwanted things, disease. So hot composting is a process that you can't guarantee 100% it gets rid of all them problems, but you can try your best to get, you know, sort of eradicate the bulk of them. It's time. Over time, things will break down and be safe. You know, but hot composting speeds things up. You know, and when I say hot, it can get really hot. So, the elements of compost, like I say, it's organic matter. Now, it's very different to soil. You know, soil is kind of it has some organic matter in it naturally, but it's kind of a byproduct of erosion. It's kind of nature's little sprinkle of eroded rock and stone, dust. You know, they'll fall leaf, bits of grass, twigs. Over time, the layers, you know, it has a lot of trace elements and minerals that can only be found in rock, but it does get into soil through erosion, and obviously in the deeper subsoils there's all sorts of trace elements further down, and some of your deeper rooting things like trees, you know, they can tap into that source and it pretty much gets sucked into the tree and it puts it out into its foliage, and that's the way you can bring it into your compost. You know, they will naturally be there, but the balance is different depending on what you put in your ground. But generally a good mixture is all you need, because the insects will do the work for you, and they need elements the same as what we do that keep us alive. We need food, we need air, and we need water. And also they're the main three elements, and then conditions or environment. So we struggle to live in harsh dry conditions. We'd also struggle to live in really wet conditions. So it's finding that perfect medium. So there is no difference between what lives beneath the ground to what lives above the ground, really. We both have a job to do. We kind of fill things from the top and they bring things up from below. And then this thin layer called soil is where the mix happens. A lot of life happens in the very top of the soil. So least disturbance is a good thing, but you're going to disturb it to a degree. You know, there's all the hoeing. If you're gardening, you're going to be hoeing, raking, maybe lightly turning things. So there is a bit of disturbance, but it doesn't take long to recover from that, because you're going to get weeds, because it's nature's way of covering the ground, because the ground does not like being exposed. You know, and a lot of insects don't like to live on top of the soil, to live just beneath it. This is why you can mulch with some things. You know, you don't have to dig compost in, just put it on the top, you know, and the bugs will take it down for you. So we'll have a look at things that you can compost, and how it can be speeded up. You know, you don't need anything, but you don't need one of these compost. I don't really rate these compost bins at all. I don't really use these for composting. This one here, I just get soil clods, shove them in there. It's full of ants, but they break it down to a real fine crumb, and then in the winter months they go down, and I can take some of the crumbly soil away, and I can mix it with my own compost, so you get like a loamy based, because it is like just soil clods with grass clumps and weeds and just junk that gets shoved in there. And then in this one, any surplus compost that's ready, that I'm no longer rotting down, can go in there to stop it being weathered away, you know what I mean? Because you can have all that nutrients locked up in the compost, and if it's sat there and exposed to downpours of rain, the nutrients will wash out. Yeah, they'll go into the soil where it is, but you want to try and hold some of that, because the key is with organic matter is it holds nutrients for the bacteria to mix into the soil and release it for the plant's uptake. So there is an exact science about it all, but I'm just going to do it on the basics of, if you've got any place you can compost, it can just be a corner, flat ground, make a heap, and there's ways you can speed up. There is elements you can do, and some of them, you know, probably they're a little bit strange, you know, regarding the nitrogen thing, but there's elements. Browns is it for some people. You have a browns, which is things like newspaper, cardboard, twigs. Leaves are brown, you know, when they fall, and they're more of a brown than green, and everything has its own carbon to nitrogen ratio. Grass will be something probably like 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, you know, and cardboard could be something like anywhere between 2.5 to 500, you know, parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. So cardboard on its own needs to be fed with nitrogen to rot. It will rot of its own accord, but it will take nitrogen from the ground to feed the bacteria, to break it down. So it's kind of having that healthy diet of a bit of everything to get that maximum bacterial breakdown, and for the composting to begin, which will generate heat. So the more active you can get it, the hotter it will get. And I do recommend getting a thermometer for this, because you can see what your pile's doing. So as it's getting hot, it's doing its thing. When it begins to cool, it's either dried out or it's lost all its air supply, because it will start to clog up the air holes. So you can introduce some air into it and you can turn it. The other reason it might not get hot is because it's been depleted now, and that's where the worms come in. You're not going to see worms come into a really hot compost heap. They're going to stay out of the way. Until it's cool enough for them, then they'll come in and they will break it down, and they will take time to break it down. But it doesn't mean your compost isn't ready, because you can put that compost on the soil and the worms will break it down there for you. You know, so you can use it as a mulch, and the worms will feed into the soil for you. Right, so we'll crack on. I'll get a few ingredients out and we'll go through a few things. This is going to be done over a series of weeks or months maybe. So we'll get started. Right, I hope you can see everything that's in shot. I'll give you a brief go over the sort of ingredients that get used. Obviously there's some ingredients I can't get at the moment, you know, because things like in season, you know, the browns, yeah, you can go and get straw or manure with straw in, that's fine if you can get that, but I'm going along with what I've got access to right now, kind of compost. It's better to try and add it in a kind of a bulk formation rather than, you know, because if you add, you can to get the pile started. So here I've got a big tub that's been collected over the past a week or so, and it's just potato peelings, a few weeds, onion skins, tea bags. Check the tea bag brand that you use. You can check online to make sure that they are fully biodegradable, because some aren't. Luckily what I use, they are. I had a look online, and since 2018 these have been biodegradable, supposedly. They still show up a bit, but they just take a little bit longer to break down. But everything that we have really comes from the ground, so it's only a matter of time before everything goes back to ground. You know, the whole earth is a larder. You know, we take and we have to give back. That's just the principles of it. So, I said this is scraps. I would class this, apart from the cardboard, as a green. So this is quite rich in nitrogen. So if you piled this up, loads of this, it would probably anaerobically rot, which means it's a bacterial breakdown. It would smell a bit because it would just be a bit sloppy and it's very wet. So that's one ingredient. The other one that is free to most people, providing you got a lawn, is grass clippings. Brilliant stuff, but don't add it too thick because it'll be in a big matty clump. You know, probably 1/2 inch to 1 inch, feather it out, you know, and mix your pile. You can layer it if you want, you could put your general cardboard with some grass clippings on. It just takes a bit longer that way. The idea is it's a bit like the finer you can make your ingredients, the faster it'll happen. You know, it's a bit like trying to eat a big pizza. It's a bit quicker if you cut it up into pieces. And then as a brown, that's also a green, high in nitrogen. And you can bag it up, just keep moving it around, otherwise it'll get a bit smelly. But it does get very hot quick, grass does. And then obviously it's cardboard. This is plain cardboard. You can use some with, like, you know, it's not gloss coated. Most things are soya based now, inks and stuff, so they're perfectly safe. Like I say, and over time it's eroded away, so it'll be taken into the soil and it'll be perfectly safe. You know, you get some sticky labels on it, but they're paper based. Avoid using glossy papers like magazines. They will break down, providing there's no sort of, like some inked cardboard that's shiny. It can have some sort of very fine plastic coating on it, which you'll find. I mean, when you make your own compost, it doesn't look like shop compost because it's not gone through all the machinery and filters the same. You know, that's only what it looks like. The bugs in the ground aren't bothered. To them, it's food, and they will break it up into its molecules. You know, because it's like soil molecules and rock molecules are different. You know, so it all gets mixed. There is a soil test you can do in water, where you put a lump of soil in, shake it, and it'll settle in its sort of sedimentary elements. You know, your silt, sand, clay, and then your organic matter. But you don't have to do that. It's just, instead of putting all this stuff in your bin to be taken away and composted and sold back to you, you've got some space, compost it yourself. You know, there is no real, if you hate composting, in fact, just keep piling it up and it will rot. You know, if you stack it up and then you can take it from the bottom and it will rot. It will always inevitably rot eventually. And then when you put it all together, depending on how fast you've speeded the process up, allowing air and water into it and things like that, you get a product that's, you know, it resembles compost, you know, and it's got worms in it now, so it's gone through its hot process, but it still remains warm. This is from my pile. It still holds a temperature about 25 to 30, so it's still got a bit of breaking down, but it's safe to use. You could put, I mean, there's still bits of potato peeling in there, partially rotted, but you could put that on your soil if you wanted to, because I know that this has been through the hot process. Bits of twigs and stuff, I ain't bothered. You know, a few ants in there, wood lice, they're all part of the, you know, the little ecosystem that goes on to make the soil. You know, and you could sow some seeds in that, but as lumpy as it looks, you put that through a sieve, that same stuff, it starts to resemble, close to the camera, compost. So it's quite an amazing fact what your kitchen waste becomes. Things that you throw away, and you could sow seed in that without a problem. Like I say, whatever you put in your compost heap will always end up with that. And all it needs is time. You can do it quick. You know, you might notice these little tiny things in your compost. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this. But I can't see on camera. It'll be on there somewhere. All that is a worm egg case. So you've got plenty of worms in your compost. They're all doing a job. They're opening it up for air, and they're also breaking it down for you. You know, they're eating it. Slugs. They're a gardener's nightmare. But they have a role in composting. You know, they will happily go in your compost heap and break it down. I wish you'd stay in there and stay off the veg crops, you know, but that's just one of them things. But you can keep your pile active by feeding it. It's like this here is like newspaper, not broken down because it's matted. You know, so if you'd have stripped it apart a bit more, it'd have broken down. But worms will get in there and they will open it up eventually. Right, so we'll get on sort of mixing the stuff now, I think. Right, so I've got there's a little bit of compost and stuff in the bottom there, just some bits of tea bags. You know, that not even started breaking down yet. Say, because I emptied this lot, I turned it into the next bay, and that's kind of curing. I kind of call that the curing phase, but it's usable. So you can put, you know, big bits of cardboard in, shredded newspaper. Fine. How small depends how bored you are. I mean, if you want to sit there for hours tearing it to little tiny pieces, then fine, you do that. But I'm looking at just any old sort of size, just lob it in. Actually, I'm not even going to bother because once it gets wet, it'll start breaking down. You know, and I've got plenty more cardboard. And if you haven't got cardboard, it's not worry. You can always add it later. But you do need sort of like a reasonably sized mound to begin with, to get it to actually start heating up. Now if you haven't got enough nitrogen or greens, there's grass clippings and food waste, but you've got a lot of cardboard on that, there is a way you can put nitrogen into it. You can either buy things like sulphate of ammonia and mix that in. But believe it or not, we carry nitrogen in our urine. So you can mix a bit of that with some water and add it to the pile. You're putting nitrogen straight into it. Don't worry, if it's a hot pile, everything will be safe. I won't put animal waste in, you know, like dogs and cats. If you've got like rabbits, guinea pigs, chickens, eggs like that, all that can go in. Sawdust, anything like that. But it's like sawdust. If it's a mixed pile, great. It's just if it becomes like quite matted. But I'm going to mix all this up after. So on top of that, I'm going to start spraying some grass clippings. Now, it's easy to do this when you've just mowed, believe it or not, because these are already clumped together a bit because of wet. But I'm not bothered. It'll just take that a little bit longer, which gives you a chance, because you're going to be adding to this pile still for a while. You know, because there's just not enough here. You know, because compost kind of reduces to about, I'd probably say, anywhere between 15 and 30% of its original mass size. So you might have a big heap, but it soon goes. What I'm going to do, I'll whack all that in there. food scraps. You can chop these up a bit more if you want. I have a very broken tub here, put them in the bottom and just chop it up with a spade. Some more in there. Like eggshells, they take a while, but they do break down. You know, you crush them. Put gloves on for this if you don't want to get your hands dirty, but it's, I found with your hands you can actually feel whether things are wet, dry, moist. Keep throwing your stuff in. And it's simply a case of a good old fork, just fling it upwards. I mean, you can pre-soak your cardboard with some water. Because the grass is really wet, I'm going to let it soak up some of that first. It's easier to add water than take it away. Right, so we'll carry on mixing that up. We'll have a look at it after. Right, it's had a bit of a mix up in there. I've laid it all out flat at the bottom, and then I put a watering can over it, thrown a bit more cardboard in, got some more grass clippings. I've just mowed a bit of the grass, so I thought I might as well put them in now, save doing it later on. And just simply just lob all them in there. So it's good if you can sort of get an even spread with the grass. You're going to mix them in anyway, but they'll stick to the cardboard, you know, and that will help break down the all the carbon, because this is full of nitrogen. So if you've ever had a big pile of grass before, you notice it gets hot pretty quick. So all the carbon in there use up the nitrogen. You know, and you probably add more cardboard, to be honest. It's just like I say, there's no ideal mixture. If you best guess is half and half. I mean, there is a sort of more of a sort of 2/3 carbon, 1/3 nitrogen type thing. It's not perfect. If you get a fairly good mix, it'll be fine. And then it's just waiting for it to start heating up, really, because you know that'll probably heat up even at that size. But just gonna give it another mix up. So I might get in the way at camera a bit because it's actually not the biggest space here. Nothing fancy about this compost, it's just pallets, pallet timber. I've lined it with some membrane. It still allows air, because air is really important with composting. It has to have airflow. The thermometer I use, just like a basic cooking thermometer really. You know, it's about 15-16 inch long probe on it. Shove that into your pile and you can read it. And you're aiming for it to get hot, and as it starts to cool, turn the heap, and then it'll reheat up again. Which is when, you know, you can be adding more stuff, so when that's cooled, you turn it in. But if you want to speed it up, every time you add something, turn it in. Until you've got a good amount, and you can think, right, that's enough, I'm going to start letting that, you know, sort of cure. You finish it heating, the worms come in, move it somewhere else, start a fresh pile. So you don't have to mix it up super special, because you're going to be mixing it fairly regular. Just easy to like lob it up in the air, bash it about. And then what I'm going to do to finish it off is actually heap it up in a corner. You know, because some of that cardboard is still dry. I'm not concerned about that, because you can kind of add as you go. You have to be careful if you've used any lawn treatments. You know, a little bit of the grass in the bottom of this, had some lawn treatment on it, so I have to compost it for longer, just to be on the safe side. But I'll be able to use this probably a couple of months. You'll start seeing signs over the next week or so of it beginning. Once you've got that sort of magic mix to get the temperature going, then it begins. Now, this is on like soil ground. You can buy these so-called compost starters, but you can get a trowel full of soil from your garden, throw that in there because that's full of microbes. You know, or if you've got a compost heap next to it that's still going, you can just sort of like get a little handful of that and just throw it in. I mean, that'll be full of, you know, microorganisms. They'll just migrate into there. When it gets hot, any worms will come out of it, obviously. But the idea is you cover it. Have you got any old compost bags? They're fine. You don't have to cover it perfectly. All it is to kind of prevent some of the moisture escaping, because that cardboard will soak that up. So you can just, I mean, you can cover it with more cardboard if you want, because that will insulate it as well. But there's all sorts you cover it. I mean, I've got some lino I use. You know, people use carpets. I try and avoid letting it get rained on, because it will just keep cooling it, you know what I mean, cold water. But lino's a good thing. As I say, it doesn't have to be perfect, because it will sort of condensate as it warms up against the back of this, and then the cardboard will absorb that moisture. You know, so your cardboard's not too wet, it's just got enough in it, and any excess moisture can drain through the ground. Got a little bee hanging around here because he likes the smell of the sweetness of it all. It doesn't smell horrible, you know, if it's done properly. It doesn't smell. It only smells if it gets compacted and wet. So that's it for this bit anyway. So we'll have a look at it in probably a few days, and then I'll turn it again, and then I'll put the probe in. Right. Right, it's had a bit of a mix up in there. I've laid it all out flat at the bottom, and then I put a watering can over it, thrown a bit more cardboard in, got some more grass clippings. I've just mowed a bit of the grass, so I thought I might as well put them in now, save doing it later on. And just simply just lob all them in there. So it's good if you can sort of get an even spread with the grass. You're going to mix them in anyway, but they'll stick to the cardboard, you know, and that will help break down the all the carbon, because this is full of nitrogen. So if you've ever had a big pile of grass before, you notice it gets hot pretty quick. So all the carbon in there use up the nitrogen. You know, and you probably add more cardboard, to be honest. It's just like I say, there's no ideal mixture. If you best guess is half and half. I mean, there is a sort of more of a sort of 2/3 carbon, 1/3 nitrogen type thing. It's not perfect. If you get a fairly good mix, it'll be fine. And then it's just waiting for it to start heating up, really, because you know that'll probably heat up even at that size. But just gonna give it another mix up. So I might get in the way at camera a bit because it's actually not the biggest space here. Nothing fancy about this compost, it's just pallets, pallet timber. I've lined it with some membrane. It still allows air, because air is really important with composting. It has to have airflow. The thermometer I use, just like a basic cooking thermometer really. You know, it's about 15-16 inch long probe on it. Shove that into your pile and you can read it. And you're aiming for it to get hot, and as it starts to cool, turn the heap, and then it'll reheat up again. which is when you can be adding more stuff. So when that's cooled, you turn it in. But if you want to speed it up, every time you add something, turn it in until you've got a good amount, and you can think, right, that's enough. I'm going to start letting that, sort of cure. You finish it heating, the worms come in, move it somewhere else, start a fresh pile. So you don't have to mix it up super special, because you're going to be mixing it fairly regular. Just easy to like lob it up in the air, bash it about. And then what I'm going to do to finish it off is actually heap it up in a corner. Because some of that cardboard is still dry. I'm not concerned about that, because you can kind of add as you go. You have to be careful if you've used any lawn treatments. A little bit of the grass in the bottom of this had some lawn treatment on it, so I have to compost it for longer, just to be on the safe side. But I'll be able to use this probably a couple of months. You'll start seeing signs over the next week or so of it beginning. Once you've got that sort of magic mix to get the temperature going, then it begins. Right, this is on like soil ground. You can buy these so-called compost starters, but you can get a trowel full of soil from your garden, throw that in there, because that's full of microbes. Or if you've got a compost heap next to it that's still going, you can just sort of like get a little handful of that and just throw it in. I mean, that'll be full of, microorganisms. They'll just migrate into there. When it gets hot, any worms will come out of it, obviously. But the idea is you cover it. Have you got any old compost bags? They're fine. You don't have to cover it perfectly. All it is to kind of prevent some of the moisture escaping, because that cardboard will soak that up. So you can just, you can cover it with more cardboard if you want, because that will insulate it as well. But there's all sorts you cover it. I mean, I've got some lino I use. People use carpets. I try and avoid letting it get rained on, because it will just keep cooling it, cold water. But lino's a good thing. I say it doesn't have to be perfect, because it will sort of condensate as it warms up against the back of this, and then the cardboard will absorb that moisture. So your cardboard's not too wet, it's just got enough in it, and any excess moisture can drain through the ground. Got a little bee hanging around here, because he likes the smell of the sweetness of it all. It doesn't smell horrible, if it's done properly. It doesn't smell. It only smells if it gets compacted and wet. So that's it for this bit anyway. So we'll have a look at it in probably a few days, and then I'll turn it again, and then I'll put the probe in. Right. Right, 6 days have passed since I started this heap. I've got a few more things to put in it today. Just kitchen scraps, a bit of cardboard, a few more grass clippings. So, kind of prepared some cardboard the other day. Sat out in the sun and I just ripped the load up. It's just there on hand, so I can just throw it in as I need it. When I got grass clippings, I put them in a bag. Slung some cardboard in with them, just tied the bag up, because it'll condensate and then the cardboard will soak it up. It just says I have to keep soaking it. It probably will need a bit of water today, because it has been hot. But, I mean, it's been covered over, so a lot of the, the moisture will have been absorbed into the cardboard. It's just getting it to the cardboard soft enough to rip it up. when you start turning it. Obviously, the more you shred your card and your ingredients, the faster it'll break down. I've got another cardboard box. It's come today, her delivery. This is a case of, if you've got any tape on it, well, peel it off. I've done it in the past where there's little bits, but it doesn't matter because when your compost is ready, you'll just be pulling bits of plastic out. So just go around and peel that off. I'm not going to do it now because I've got some cardboard shredded up, but we sent it with this in, which is pre-shredded cardboard, which is very handy, to be honest. But the other thing is, if you throw it in like that, when you come to turn it, it's a bit of a nightmare. So things like that you could soak in water and just pull apart, throw it in. If your compost needs some moisture, pre-soak your cardboard. It's not soaking wet. It will, if it's hot and you put cold ingredients, it will cool it down a little bit. Move it out of the way. So, pull the cover off. Bit of liner on it. But this tub's falling to pieces now. It's fairly damp. It's got a few ants in there, which you kind of expect in a compost heap. You will get some ants. Tends to be if it's a bit dry though. It doesn't look dry, badly dry, but obviously that was on the plastic, so the other bits around the side of it, like this, that is still dry. So I'm going to smash the pile apart, throw this other stuff in, and then mix it up. So I'll get on with that. It's quite wet in the middle. It's just this outer stuff. But, it must have been fairly hot because things have gone white, and it is warm to touch that. It's like an ash. That the grass has got hot. It'll just be a clump of grass that's got a bit hot. Smell wise, it doesn't smell bad, it just smells like grass clippings. I'll try and bring the camera a bit closer, and then you can have a look. Like I say, if you've got a fork, spade will do. It's it will start to break down pretty soon, so don't give up, just keep adding your stuff. Doing this allows air into it, which will kind of help get everything mixed in. So any hot spots, things will go through the heap. And make the kind of get it a right good mix. Right, so just going to throw all my other ingredients on top. Okay, just a bowl, tissue in there, tea bags, spud peel. Might be an eggshell, just crush it up. And then lob it in. A couple of bits of card in there because I usually put cardboard in the bottom of this. It just helps soak up the juice out of tea bags. You can get a little compost caddy, but it's an old washing up bowl. And you just put some cardboard in it and then repeat the process. And then when it gets full, bring it out. And same again, the scraps, and weed seeds, more cardboard that I threw in the bottom. That's fairly dry, that. But some bits of sweet pea trimmings and bits of roots. I've got a pet tortoise, so obviously when he does his business, that goes in there as well. We've got grass clippings with card mixed in. And just sort of knock it about and see if you need to add any water. You can always drain away the water a little bit. But if you want it to dry out a bit, leave it like that for a day or two. But I'll put a little bit more card in it, I think. I should imagine, yeah, I get it. Plenty of carbon in it at the moment, and then I can add the next lot of clippings to it, which will be in a couple of weeks. Just simply spread it about. Watering can, a bit of wetting down. So don't worry, because the cardboard will soak up a hell of a lot of water. Simply mix it. Best with throwing it about. You got chunky bits, like the base off a Chinese cabbage. That you can chop it up if you want. I mean, as you come and turn it, it'll turn to mush anyway. And just simply reheap it. Cardboard's still fairly dry. I'm still building the bulk up yet at the moment, so I'm not too worried yet. I've got all the bits of card on at the moment. And then cover it back up. Plastic bag on it. Just a bit of lino. Move the camera off it. Around there. Just helps insulate it and help it condensate a bit. And then I think this time I'll just move you up a little bit. And put a thermometer in it. And then I think it'll start warming up proper now. Only warm up for about 4 or 5 days. But if you can get it to go 50 or 60, you're doing alright. Just sort of stab it through the plastic. It's kind of, imagine where the core of it is. The core's like down here in the middle somewhere. That's what you're after. You see that starts warming. you know things are happening. You know, and then I'll add the next lot once it begins to cool. So we'll have a look at it when it's warmed up, and then it'll just be a case of repeating that process once it begins to cool again, because that means it's depleted of something, whether it's moisture, nitrogen, carbon or air. So usually, a lot of time it's air. When you put air in it, it fires again. And cardboard's good because it's corrugated, so it's lots of little air pockets in it. So all I'll do is I'll just put the bust up tub. As I bring kitchen scraps out, I'll just throw them into that for now. So I'm adding them in bulk. You know, and it just gets to throw a bit of cardboard in the bottom of there. And you can just dampen the cardboard up. And all the goodness will soak into the cardboard, which then obviously goes in your heap. So I'll probably give it another 3 days, and then I'll see if the temperature's started to spike up a bit on it. And then I should imagine another 5-6 days from today, add some muck and then turn it. So we'll come back then. Right, here we are, back at the small heap. I've left it a few more days than I was going to, because we've had a bit of a frost and that, so I thought, well, save turning it and disturbing the pile and cooling it down too much. It has been up to nearly 40 degrees. It started dropping again now, so we've had a frost last few nights, so weather's been alright. We forecast a bit of rain and some high winds, so during the next few days. So I thought I'll do this now, and then it can sort of be left for maybe a week to sort of start composting this fresh stuff to go in, which is just same as normal. It's just potato peelings, just a courgette, it's just a bit of weeding stuff. Nothing with a weed seed on it, because I don't think this pile is going to be big enough to maintain a massive heat. It's all about mass. If you get a big pile, you get some real heat then, but if you're careful what you put into it, it will still compost. You know, it's as long as you can kind of get, you know, around 30-degree mark, it will still compost. You know, because the worms will quite happily go in it and do it. And it doesn't have to be completely broken down when you're going to use it, which I'll probably show later on, you know, when it's a bit more broken down. It's just maintaining the moisture side really, because it might dry out or it might get too wet. Like I say, it's always easier to add water than try and take it away. So that's the thermometer out. It's currently just sat at 30 degrees. So it has cooled down, but it will warm up each time you add something to it. It'll probably warm up, you know, providing there's enough nitrogen there. Obviously when you put grass clippings in, it'll really get hot. Like I say, grass clippings, they're good, but they can mat up a little bit, so it's a bit tricky. Well, it's starting to look a bit brown now. Just trying to get its tub out of the way before it falls to pieces on me. So it's just all kitchen scraps. And I've thrown some cardboard in there, because obviously when I collect the stuff I always put a bit of cardboard in the bottom. So what we do is the usual thing, kind of just smash the heap apart. You know, you can just sling the new stuff on top if you want, but the idea is try and speed it up a little bit and see when we can actually get to use this. So it's a bit, so I don't know why you can see that, but it's got wood lice in it, a few worms. Doesn't smell bad, doesn't smell great, but it smells earthy, to be honest. It's not a horrible smell. It's just generally, it's a bit wet, so I might leave the cover off it. So obviously when it gets hot it will steam out a little bit. But yeah, it's starting to, as you dig down to it, it's more wetter, but it's, you know, it's already got worms in it. It doesn't take them long to find it, because they like the old kitchen scraps. But it's breaking up well. A few clumps in it. I don't know whether it's grass or cardboard. It's just cardboard that's wrapped up in grass. But it'll all break down. So how old's this compost heap? About 2 weeks, I think. About 2 weeks old, and it's already gone to that. It doesn't take long. You know, it's a little bit of extra turning to aerate, mixing in. You know, I mean, if you can get a little bit of hay and chop it up with a lawnmower or something like that, that'll help dry it out, and it puts more fibrous into it, because cardboard's out of carbon. You know, if you soak a bit of cardboard, there's a bit sort of matty. But once it's all been through a worm and that, and you put it on top of the soil, some of the worms will come up and take it down. But it's all food for your plants. You know, you can heap it up outside in the sun a few days if you want to dry it up a bit. But overall, it's a few stalky bits. They can stay in there for now. Because anything that when you come to use it that's not composted enough, you just sling it and start your next heap. I mean, usually it'll take me a bit longer than doing this, but because I don't turn it as often, but you kind of go for give it a turn every 5 to 10 days. It will speed it up. Which isn't so bad when the weather's nice. It's not. I mean, obviously it's going to cool right down now because it's exposed. But it only takes a couple of days for that heat to climb back up. I am tempted to put a little bit more cardboard in it, but I might just put the cardboard in that's actually mixed in this for now. To try and see if I can dry it out a little bit. And I'll mix it, and I'll just leave it flat, I think, for a couple of days. And hopefully just before the rains come, because this roof isn't waterproof. It's only like a membrane, so it will drip through. Trying to see what the moisture's like in a couple of days, and then I'll reheap it. You know, because the worms will come up underneath this fresh stuff and start gnawing at it. But I'll mix it in. Just a case of put it all on. Tea bags. So I mean, there's even worms coming to the bucket. Like old brassica seedlings I pulled out. You know, there's all sorts of onion skin. Bits of tomato plants that I cleared out that I don't need anymore. Some bit of lily here, tiny bits that I pulled out. And then when I had a clear up round me veg patch, got rid of some like yellowing leaves. And then also I've just got like, radish tops. You know, bits of radish tops there. A few bits of weeds, but nothing that's in seed, so it shouldn't really cause a problem. And then just scatter that across the top. Bit of card there, I'll rip that up a bit smaller. You don't have to, but it can be a nuisance sometimes when you put your fork in and you just get the same piece of cardboard stuck to the end of the fork. So once it's wet enough, it'll break up quite quick. You know, worms like that because they can go in between the corrugated bit. You know, and it's a source of carbon. You know, whether it's the best source of carbon, you know, is subject, but it is a carbon at the end of the day. And it's biodegradable, it's safe, and helps make your compost. Now there is the odd sprouting potato in this. It will, if it doesn't get hot, it will grow. So your option with that sort of thing, you can either leave it out or chop it up. So I don't think I've got anything to chop it up with. I've got some sort of sharp edge thing here that'll kind of mush it up a bit. If you just break it up a bit, that's fine. I mean, if you get any toughish sort of stalks, you know, it's like this woody stalk here, snap it a bit, or you could get a hammer and pulverise them and mash them up. That's what you tend to do with like broccoli or cabbage stems when it's quite tough. You know, worms will take a while for them, so you can lay them down with a hammer just to break them up a little bit. That'll speed it up. You know, there's another potato there that's a bit manky, but I'm not too worried about it. Just hit him at the end of the fork, and worms will go in and deal with that. I mean, it's like that. You see, he's just twists that, set the top off. You know, he's got a slug in there already. I don't mind him in the compost heap as long as he stays in there, because they're all part of this this whole composting cycle. You know, I'll probably get round to adding some more grass clippings next week. See how the weather goes, because it is kind of destined for a little bit of rain, to be honest. You know, but I'll leave this to do its thing probably for a week. I've got some other jobs to get on with. I need to sort the polytunnel out and some tomato plants to get planted. You know, because it's just past the middle of May now. Well, I think it's about it's 16th, 17th, I can't think. But it is composting. It's a little bit wet, so I'm not going to add any water to this at all. And if it dries out a little bit of its own accord, great. If not, I can put a little bit more cardboard into it, or just not add any water to it for a while, because obviously there's water in that green vegetation I've just put in. Like I say, I'm not going to heap it up just now. I don't need to video heaping it up. Same principle, just make it in a tall heap. So it just depends when I do it. Might give it like a couple of days and then heap it up. If it starts raining, I will have to cover it with something, because I don't want to get it absolutely soaked. And now and then, if I get a chance, I'll just flick it about the fork, and that'll just bring any of the damper stuff up and give it a chance to dry out a little bit. You know, but it will rot even if you heaped it up. You know, it will gradually come right. You know, and probably another week you could probably get some sort of sievable stuff out of this if you wanted to, but it needs to be a bit drier than this. You know, I would be tempted then to put it out on the tarpaulin on a couple of sunny days to dry out, give a chance for worms to escape out of it, because it'll be full of worms. That's it really, it's just a case of keep adding the scraps and whatever you've got. Try and get a bit of a varied sort of mixture. You know, and if you put your tea bags in, don't worry, eventually your fork will puncture them, the worms will get in there, your baby worms get in there, and they'll break it down. It will go over time, providing a biodegradable bag, which I think most of them are these days. But you know, like I said before, you can go and check online just to make sure. And I say to aerate, just put your fork under it, flick it up and hit it. And that'll just fluff it up a little bit, get the air pockets in there. I mean, tea bags going on it already and splitting, so you only need like one hole in it, and that's them started. There's the odd full spud. I'll deal with that another time. So that's that bit done. So I should imagine, yeah, give it another 5 days, and then we'll have a look at it again, and there'll be some more food scraps. Whether I've mowed the lawn by then, we'll see. But food scraps, cardboard is all I can give it at the moment. I might have a little bit of straw knocking about somewhere, I don't know. Some animal bedding, not manure, just like the actual straw. You can put manure in. If you've got manure, you can add some manure in if you want to, but manure I tend to like to do in a lot bigger heap to make sure it does get hot, to make it safe. Right, so we'll come back to this in a few days. Right, back at the compost heap. So That's 7 days later, so it's 26 May, I think it is now. So got some more scraps. I've put it in the wheelbarrow. Just add some cardboard in it. So I pre-wet it up and that, and turned it about to mix it before I add it to this. No, it's been a bit sluggish temperature-wise. It's kind of been hovering sort of 28 to 30. It's not really gone up. So which it's probably more of a nitrogen thing, to be honest, because there's plenty of cardboard in there. But I'd say it's a mass thing. It's not a massive heap. It's quite a small heap, so you're not going to get the heat like you would in a big cubic metre sort of size. So I've got some more stuff to add in now. I've not mowed the garden yet for any grass clippings because it's been so dry. Grass growth's been a bit slow. So, but I think next week I'll have to mow it. So probably next week I'll put a mix of grass clippings and kitchen scraps, maybe a little bit more cardboard, mix it all up, and that'll be the final addition to this sort of pile, you know, for this composting sort of show thing that I'm doing. And you can just mimic this way even in a smaller pile or even a bigger pile, you know, whichever you've got the space for. Just basically show you how it can be done. And one of the ways I do it's the main way really, you know, if you've only got bits going in, then it's going to be a cold compost heap. If you can hold your ingredients back in bags and things, you know, grass clippings, you can try and dry them out if you want. You know, the finer you chop your ingredients up, the quicker they'll rot. And it actually, when you make the pile initially, the more bulk you can get in, the better. So you could have, you know, you could store some of your nitrogens and stuff like that, your greens, best you can, and then get yourself a good bit of brown, whether you go and buy some straw or whatever, you know, or hay, and add it all in, give it a mix up, and that'll get your initial cook going on then. But this is just kind of done in a way where, using what I've got here, cardboard, a lot of cardboard, and kitchen scraps and grass clippings. That's pretty much all that's gone in it, as far as I think. You know, on weed and stuff, you know. But mainly, kitchen scraps. I mean, when you get into the big harvest season, when you start growing stuff, you have a lot of, you know, obviously weeding, and then you get that when you've harvested cauliflower, the greens. There's quite a lot of greens going in then, so it can start to stink a bit if you don't have the browns. That's why I've got a lot of cardboard in here, in the other bay at the moment, ready to tear up when I start adding stuff. So I want to try and close this down, and then I can start concentrating on making sort of a harvest time heap then, which I'll probably use then later in the year, along with this one that's kind of just finishing off now. So same as usual, smash the heap apart a bit to allow a bit of air in. I've left it uncovered to try and dry it out a little bit, but it, like I said, I mean, stuff with like cardboard and tea bags and stuff, they do hold on to moisture quite well. If you want to really dry it out, pull it out from there and put it in the sun, you know, for a few days. But it'll have worms in there, and you do that, the worms are gonna go away. You know, and you want them in there, really. You know, especially if it's not getting hot, they'll be breaking it down. So it's just a case of smashing it apart. See, you know, it's still composting, right? You know, there's no real seeds that have gone in it. You know, but like say, tomato seeds and pepper seeds, they will sprout at some point, same as like that from a bit of potato sprouted. You know, it will grow. So just keep knocking it back, and it won't grow then. But when I add the grass clippings, it'll get a really good mix up that day. And then I'll probably turn it, you know, if it heats up, as it starts to cool again. And that's just a little package of what got stuck down the side there from when I reheaped it after the last video. You know, I left it for a couple of days and I just lobbed it in the corner. But you know, things start trying to root as well. You know, there's plenty of spud peelings in there, tea bags, but it's all kind of, the cardboard that's in there's taking up a lot of the moisture, so there's some more cardboard in this next batch. But it's just the same, it's just kitchen scraps, some weeds. I've taken off a couple of branches off my tomato plants. It's just a bit of a mix. Shovel on that. Just lob it in. Obviously, with it being very dry this season, I imagine there's a big reduction in slug sort of distribution at the moment. You do get the odd slug in there, but I've been struggling a bit this year. Not that I'm too fussed. It's nice to not have your crop slug with them. I'm sure they'll come at some point when the rains do though. There's a few bits in there, some cardboard and whatnot. There's not a lot gone in that time, but it just keeps it fed. Because the worms will just kind of go for that pretty much straight away. They'll start nailing that. You know, you can't stab it about, it bruises it up. Just give it a bit of a mixing. Like I say, you don't have to mix it, you just keep adding to it like that if you want to leave it. It'll take longer, but it doesn't matter. Depends how soon you want it. It's just a case of lobbing it back in the corner again. It's getting harder to scoop up now with the fork because a lot of it falls through it, so it's time for the shovel, I think. That's what I've got to hand anyway. You just keep putting it on top of it and it'll kind of settle to its own sort of pyramid pattern that it can support itself. All in all, it's starting to become a big difference, and it's pretty much 3 weeks ago I started this now. So I should imagine, once I get the grass clippings in next week, give it a good month after that, and it should start resembling something more usable. So that's it for this week. Right, this is going to be the final edition of stuff. I might put a bit more cardboard in. I'll just see how wet it gets once this lot goes in. It's just kitchen scraps, and I've mowed the lawn, so there's a bit of grass as well. Same again, just tea bags and all sorts. I mean, stuff like that really wants chopping up a bit, but I'll leave it. I'll see how it goes. Probably just break it up a bit by hand. So, first of all, same as last time, I'll smash the pile apart, flatten it down. It's quite stodgy, but that's say it's the cardboard and and whatnot that does that. But you know, after these, all it's had so far, it's, I mean, you could put that on top of the soil probably. I wouldn't advise it, could do it a little bit longer, but you know, or if you were planting something out like beans or something, you could dig a trench and put it into that. Temperature wise, it's just been mulling around 30 again, so it needs a bit more nitrogen in it for heat. So I should imagine the grass clippings will do it. I just need to make sure it's a right good mix, because I don't want it clumping up grass clippings because it'll end up stinking. I'm just pretty much going to try and lob that in. So there's plenty enough in there. You know, if I had a bit more time, I'd have put half of that in and left half out, you know, to dry out, but we've been having a bit of rain, so I'll just put it in. And it's going to get quite wet. Yes, so I think what I might do, I might give it a good mix up, and I'll give it a couple of days, and then I might turn it. Might turn it every 3 days. Give it a bit of a turn. I'm just going to get the fork now and give it a good mix up. Same again, just throw it up in the air. You know, you've got any other bits, hay and any manure, leaves, anything like that, they can all go in now. I'm going to put these kitchen scraps in. I'll leave that carrot out actually. So that's your tea bags and everything. Bit of eggshell. You can crush your eggshell a bit more if you want, but it's not the most accessible composting because I've got a manure pile behind me, but I sort of squeeze it all in. I mean, for this sort of size pile, you could probably use one of the Dalek type things, as long as it's got holes drilled in it for airflow, and sort of just lift it off and do it that way. So the main thing is trying to get it really well mixed up so you're not getting big matted clumps of grass. I think that'll do for now. Let's get a shovel and try and get some of this loose stuff around the sides on it. That's about as good a mountain as it's going to get for today. You know, and some moisture will evaporate and some will sink to the bottom. So then when you turn it in a few days, it'll displace some of the moisture again. So we'll come back to it in a few days and have a look, and then once I'm happy it's all not clumping up, I'll put it in its final place, because I need to start using this bay for the next batch soon. So I might even put it in a bag or in the black Dalek over there. Say, because when I'm starting to harvest things now, that's going to be sort of my winter batch. But there should be a small amount of compost here, you know, which will always help. You know, anything you put on top of the soil, it'll help it. Right, so we'll come back to that in a few days. So I'll just move the camera so you can have a bit of a closer look at it before I wrap it up for today. So there's chunky bits in it and there's small bits in it, but as long as it's really well mixed, and continue to mix it every few days, the more you churn it, the better it'll be, the faster it'll happen. The main thing is, you know, it's all the weight, it compacts at the bottom, and say it might get hot with the grass clippings and the worms might stay away for a few days. Keep the airflow into it, the bacteria will break it down, and it'll start producing something that resembles compost. Right, it's 25th of June. Going to uncover this pile now. I've not touched it actually for a good week. So I just, since the last sort of update on it where I did some grass clipping and stuff, I've just turned it a few times, and then we've had some rain and high winds and all that sort of stuff in between. So it got quite wet in there. So there's probably going to be a few things sprouting in there, because obviously it's not been a big heap to get really, really hot. So we'll have a look and see if I can get anything off it today to try and sow some seeds in, just to sort of, like, you know, say it's viable compost, it'll work. So I'll uncover it. yeah, I can see there's a few sprouts, probably from potato peelings. You know, if you had a really big heap, they would obviously get scorched. Yeah, there's worms in it. Like I say, most of it, it's just, these are different potato peel, a lot of these. You know, if you rummage them all the way down. Yeah, there's potato peeling still not rotted in it, but it's fine, you can take, I mean, it's, where the worms have casted it up the top, you'll carefully take some of it off. You know, I mean, that, I don't know whether you can see, but there's a little yellow thing, that's a worm egg. But it's I'd say that's usable. You know, you could sieve it through, and anything that's not quite rotted down, put it back in. So what I'll do, I'll move the camera and I'll pull a forkful out and we'll look at it in the wheelbarrow. I thought I'll do it on this little potting tray instead. It's a bit higher up off the floor, it's easier to film that way. So I'm just going to poke the fork in and take some out. I'll put a sieve there because I'm going to see what I can actually sieve out of it, because it will be quite lumpy, because you know, this sort of compost is ideal for putting on top of your ground. But like I say, you can sieve stuff off it to sow seeds in. Should be able to. Just in case, put the fork in. Don't need that much. Right. Good about that, I'm dropping it everywhere already. It'd probably be even better if you could leave it out for a couple of hours to dry out, because it will be fairly wet. You know, and there'll be lots of worms in this. There's bits of plastic, eggshell, you know. I suppose it does degrade down, bits of wood, and like I said, there's sprouts in it. There's all sorts of bits of junk in it. It's just homemade compost. You know, there's a few little grass strands. But like I say, if you had a big heap where you could get it to, you know, 60 plus for days and days, that's an uncomposted tea bag. So all the bits are in there. I'm just going to sieve some off, see what we can get. You know, a lot of the worms will go through the sieve. A little bit of plastic there. Oh, that's a chunk of radish. You know, but these, because it's wet, it'll stick to the sieve quite a lot. You know, if you put it on top of your ground, just every couple of days come out and knock it about with the rake. The worms will come up and take it down. Now, bearing in mind this is what, 50 days or something like that since it actually began. You know, so it's still like bits of tea bags. There always is, because you always find them on top of the ground, all like white and washed out. But the tea leaves itself actually going. It's a case of catching them with a fork when you're turning it. There's a chunk of potato there. Well, you know, you get the general idea. Put that back in. You know, you can make some vermiculite with it if you want. There's full of worms in there, but there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's fine. You know, you can mix a bit of soil with it if you wanted to, or sand to lighten it up a bit if you want. But we'll just go with a simple pot, 7cm pot. This is just to try it out. I'm not going to, you know, grow them all the way in this pot. So it's just to see how viable it is for seeds. And then we'll see how they get on. Because it's quite wet, I'm not even actually going to water it. Got some just radish, because they're quick and usually straightforward. But I'm sure it'll be fine with any sort of seed. I'm just going to put 5 in, I think. I'm going to plant them like in a bit of a 5 of a dice. Get a general spacing, and then you can see how they go. You know, it might be worth, you know, doing a second batch of different seeds just in case there's a problem with your seed. You know, because you might think, oh, they're not germinating, it's a compost, when it could be like really old seeds. I'm just going to get that and just lightly cover it, you know, and then if it's alright, I mean they should be yay in a couple of weeks, because radish don't take long at all. So there's worms in there, but they will find the way out the holes at the bottom of the pot. You know, I'm not going to put it in the direct hot sun because it will dry out, because it's like worm casting compost, this really. You know, all this is the stuff that you put in that's gone through a worm. You know, the fluffier stuff. There's still like little black beetles, like rove beetles. They're all part of the whole composting process. But overall, yeah, for some quick, small heap, you know, you can do it anywhere, really, you know, but it is good to keep it covered, stop it drying out. But you can, like I say, you could spread this out for a few hours on the tarpaulin, let it dry out a bit, and bag it up, or put it into another compost bay, just to let it age, and it'll be fine. You know, if you wanted to mix some other things into it, you know, like I say, you could do like a big mix of vermiculite with it, which will lighten it up even more, you know, or perlite. But there's nothing wrong with that, and if you lay that on top of your ground, about 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick, you know, like that sort of thing, all the worms will come up and that'll all go down into your soil. And it'll act as a mulch as well. You know, there will be weed seeds in this, but if you hot rot it, you know, it knocks that sort of fact down. I have started another heap off, which is going to be my main heap, you know, which is everything goes in that, you know, any brassica leaves, all that sort of stuff, and any potato tops. And that will obviously be a lot bigger heap. There won't be a question that'll get up to temperature easy enough, because it's a lot bigger. I mean, even now it's probably 4 times the size of that was. Yeah, it's got some fresh grass clippings on because I've mowed the lawn, but nothing wrong with that at all. For pretty much a cold composting in sort of 50 days, you can't grumble really. Like I say, it's a key thing is get the bulk of the ingredients. You know, you can carbon and nitrogen, 50-50 mix or something like that. It don't have to be perfect, but it will rot, inevitably. It will just rot. Whatever it is, it will rot down. You know, some things will just take longer than others. So we'll look back at them in a couple of weeks, and that'll probably wrap this composting video up, I think, you know, once I've tested this is okay. Right, so we'll check back in them soon. Right, it's Tuesday the 14th of July. So I thought I'd just check these radish that I sowed 25th or something of last month. A bit of a break in the weather for change. It's been a bit hit and miss the weather, so thought, well, since the sun's popped out for a bit, we'll have a look how these are doing. I'm not going to grow full term, it was just to see if the seeds were viable. So I don't know if you can remember, I sowed five seeds, just radish. They had a bit of water last night because they were pretty limp, because I've not really taken any real great care of them, they've just been up to their own. But so we'll have a closer look. Looks like all 5. Yep, all 5 have germinated. There's one at the side here, one in the middle are a bit, you know, smaller, but even still they've all germinated. So just try and pop it out of the pot and see what the root structure's like and everything. You know, so there's plenty of roots. Don't know where you can see. Plenty of roots. I'll see if I can. They're not going to be a big radish at the moment because they've probably got another week or so to grow. If you had them in a bigger pot, obviously, but little, you know, baby radish. Nothing amazing, but you know, if you had this in a big pot and you sowed radish or lettuce, cabbage, anything like that, they'll be just fine. As I say, it was just an experiment to make sure it didn't have any sort of impact. Growth wise, everything seemed to germinate okay. Like I say, so it'd be like what, 20 days, 19, 20 days, something like that. You know, so they roughly take about, you know, 30 days radish in a good growing condition. You know, this is a tiny pot that's run dry a few times, so they have had a setback. But no nasty bugs, no like deformed growth on them, so everything looks okay. Like I said, when you're only using kitchen waste, you don't really get a lot of problem. So that's, you know, a way of doing my compost. But obviously when I do it in a bigger heap, you know, the whole hot rotting process. But if you can't get a big heap, it just goes to show you can do it, because it will get a little bit warm. It's just part of the, you know, the breakdown. And just give it time, you know, you don't have to do it, you know, rapid. I mean, this compost will be now, 36, I can't think of it. I think it's fifth, I think. Yeah, 5th of May I started it. So it's a fair bit old, but I mean, they've had, like I say, they've had like nearly 20 days in this pot. So, you know, you can compost anything. You know, you don't need a special bin like me. Just find a little corner that's a bit shaded or something like that. Just heap it up in the corner. You know, it doesn't have to. Covering it does help. You know, if you can keep the rain off it. Obviously, where my compost bin is, it does puddle a bit in there for just the height of the garden, the way it works. You know, so I need to sort of move my compost bin at some point, but it doesn't really bother me at the moment, because our compost, like what I'm making now, will go on the ground, you know, later in the season. So don't be afraid to try it yourself. Say, because when you take your radish, you know, you pull your radish out, and then you'll take your radish off, and then that top goes back in the compost cycle to give you compost to grow your next batch in. So it's a continuous cycle. It's hard to actually produce, you know, to be self-sufficient, unless if you can gather or scrounge in materials, you know, like straw. You know, if you know anyone with horses or small animals like guinea pigs and rabbits, all that all helps. So I hope this has been a helpful sort of video that helps people out, you know, that are new to composting or seem to say, you know, they can't seem to do it. It will do it no matter what. If you just pile the stuff in and just leave it, it will rot. It will rot. You know, if you cover it, it does stop the light getting to it, so it gets a chance to rot. Otherwise, you'll get things that will grow, and it'll just look like a big bunch of weeds and all sorts growing out of it. But underneath that, it will be compost. So thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next, well, probably allotment video. See you now. Bye bye.